Hello viewers, welcome to K Diagnostics Auto Channel. Dio here. Today we have a 2001 Toyota Highlander with a 2.4 liter, and the customer complaint is that the check engine light is on. So when the customer dropped off this car, the customer stated that this car had been at another shop, and she actually gave me a list of the codes that the other shop were working on. The code is P0171 and P0172. They had done some work on the car and nothing fixed the check engine light on. So they replaced a couple parts, but the check engine light did not go away. So the customer got frustrated, and this is actually a new customer. It's her first time bringing the car here. The customer got frustrated, and then somehow she talked to a friend of hers who actually knows me, and then the friend told her about me and said, hey, why don't you take it to Dio shop? And then that's how the car ended up here. So the customer said that they had replaced a couple parts. Okay, so a couple parts had been replaced on this car, and we have to keep those in mind. So they had replaced the oxygen sensors. So both upstream oxygen sensors had been replaced. I will actually give you guys a shot of the sensors. I mean, they look new. I can definitely tell that they had been replaced not too long ago. And also, the mass airflow sensor had also been replaced, okay, in attempt to fixing this issue. But unfortunately, there is no solution. Guys, I'm gonna give you a shot of the new sensors here. Here is the bank 2 sensor 1, and then here is the bank 1 sensor 2. Some of you might be wondering, why are you saying bank 2 and bank 1? I mean, I know it's an inline 4-cylinder, but the first cylinder and the fourth cylinder are regarded as bank 1, and then the second cylinder and the third cylinder are bank 2. So if you take this cover, you will actually see the first cylinder here is the first cylinder exhaust runner is connected to the fourth cylinder exhaust runner. So it kind of makes this Y shape, and then it comes down to the catalytic converter. And here is the first air fuel ratio sensor, and then here is the second one. So these two had been replaced, and also the mass airflow sensor here also had been replaced, as the customer stated. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking. Let's go inside the car, confirm the customer's complaint. Let's start the car. As you guys can see, the check engine light is right there and the engine is running. So customer complaint confirmed. So now let's turn it off and turn the key on, and let's look at the scan tool and see what kind of codes are stored in memory. I'm not gonna do the manufacturer side. I'm just gonna do I'm just gonna click on the generic side. I had done some testing, and I didn't want to turn on the camera as I started doing this, because I didn't know which direction it was gonna take me, knowing that they had replaced all these things, and someone had his hands on this engine. So let's look at the codes first. Trouble codes. Let's look at what kind of codes we have stored in memory. So hopefully you guys can see these. So we actually have 3 trouble codes. So the P0171 code is still there, and then there's a one code that's manufacturer specific, and then the other one is the misfire code. Okay, so we actually concerned about the P0171 first, because this is the only code that was in the report that the customer brought here. Now let's get out of here. Let's go back out and look at some live data. So display current data. So let's click on mode 1. So these codes, this P0171 code can be caused by a lot of things. Most of the time it's caused by a vacuum leak, or I mean, looking at the mileage that the car has, sometimes it's caused by a mass airflow sensor. So a vacuum leak, you know, in the engine bay can cause it. A dirty mass airflow sensor can cause it, or a defective O2 sensor can cause it. A defective PCV system can cause it too. So there are several things that can cause it. But so let me customize. I don't want to look at all these data PIDs. I just want to look at a couple. So let's look at engine speed, fuel, coolant temperature. I want to know. I should have also looked at freeze frame data and to see at what time this code had set. But I mean, you know what? I just don't want to look at that right now. So let's pick our fuel trim data PIDs and our oxygen sensor data PIDs. So fuel long-term and short-term fuel trim data PIDs, and also the oxygen sensor data PIDs. So this is pretty much, and the mass airflow sensor data PID as well. So this is pretty much what I'm gonna look at, but I will mostly be focused on this, on the long-term fuel trim. So the short terms and the long term. So these guys right here. So look how the long-term fuel trim data are way out of whack. I hope you guys can see these numbers. Can you see those long-term fuel trim numbers? So these two guys right here, we have 26.6% on the long-term fuel trim bank 2, and then 37.5 long-term fuel trim on bank 1. So these percentages here are already out of whack. Once the computer sees this, you know, it actually flags the check engine, so it turns the check engine light on, because these percentages are only supposed to be total fuel trim on each bank should be plus or minus 10%. Once it goes over 10%, or once it reaches usually 20%, the computer turns the check engine light on to draw the driver's attention. So now let's start the car and see what happens to those numbers. So with the engine running, we're still in open loop right now. Try to get all these on camera here. So we're still, okay, looks like we're in closed loop right now. So as you guys can see, we have positive numbers on the short terms and positive number on the long terms, which actually confirms our issue. So this engine is running lean, which means, well, technically right now it's running rich because it's running with the computer is trying to compensate for that extra air that's coming out from, somewhere, we don't know. So the computer is actually sending more fuel inside the cylinders to compensate for that excessive air, for the extra air. Okay, that's why we see all these positive numbers. So now I'm gonna give it gas. I'm gonna increase the RPM maybe around 2,000 to 3,000 and see if those fuel trim numbers will get better as I increase the engine speed. So I hope you guys could see those numbers get better a little bit. As I increase the engine speed around 2500 to 3000 RPM, the short-term numbers were going negative. I mean, the long-term numbers remained positive, but the short-term numbers were going negative, which is good, okay? Because it's supposed to go negative on the short terms and then stay positive on the long terms to kind of balance each other, okay? Looking at this, with those numbers changing, I mean those numbers kind of getting better as I was increasing the engine speed, this is usually a classic symptom of a vacuum leak or a dirty mass airflow sensor. I guess that's why the other guys at the other shop had just replaced the mass airflow sensor by looking at these data PIDs. But I checked the mass airflow sensor, it's good, it works just fine, and the issue is still there. And I also checked for vacuum. I can guarantee you guys, you can take my word for it, there's no vacuum leak on this engine. So what is it? Let me turn the engine off and let's kind of think about it a little bit, and hopefully we can all figure out together what's going on with this. It is off, but now we have confirmed the customer complaint, and we also looked at some data PIDs. There are actually a couple of things that's kind of running through my mind right now. Mass airflow sensor is new. I checked it. It works just fine. Oxygen sensors have been replaced. And I also tested the intake manifold for vacuum leaks. I didn't find any. So what do you guys think? So what do you think is the issue here? What do you think is the issue? Mass airflow sensor good, oxygen sensors are good. And I also checked the downstream one. I mean, some of you might say, oh, also look at the downstream oxygen sensors. They only replaced the upstream O2 sensors, but I also checked the downstream ones, so they're good to go. I scoped them. Also, the intake air temperature sensor, I also checked that. It's also within spec. What do you think it is? Some of you might also say, oh, because one cylinder is misfiring. Because if you have one cylinder that's misfiring and that, you know, there's no combustion occurring properly in that cylinder, that extra oxygen getting out of that cylinder can trigger that code P0171, which is system 2 lean. No guys, that's not the issue. I'm trying to make this video a little quick and short. So let's just go straight to the point. Here's what I found. After checking all these things that I told you about, I didn't find anything wrong. So I went ahead and hooked up my scope to every single injector, okay? I'm actually already hooked up right now on the signal wires of each injector. I mean, it's a 4-cylinder, and I have a 4-channel lab scope on my Zeus here. So now the next thing I'm gonna show you guys is, let's now go to the scope side and look at the waveform on the injectors and see if we have a short injector, or maybe one injector is not opening properly, because the computer might be commanding these injectors, but if we have a pinto that's somehow stuck or partially stuck within the injector, this could cause that too. So right now I am looking at the fuel system. And also one thing I forgot to mention, because it took me you know, maybe an hour. It took me a little while to really figure out what the issue is. So I'm just trying to bring you guys up to speed, and hopefully what I'm saying here makes sense. The next thing I did before I actually went to the injectors, I checked fuel pressure. I mean, I drove this, the O2 sensors were, you know, reading reach at wide open throttle, which also confirmed that the O2 sensors were just fine. I mean, I'm not gonna show this on camera again. I actually connected a fuel pressure gauge in the fuel system and checked the fuel pressure on this one is between 37 psi to 45 or 50 psi. I was just looking at the spec in the service manual not too long ago, and that was confirmed. That was confirmed. I mean, the fuel pressure is just fine. So now let's look at the injectors. Let's look at the waveforms on the waveforms of the injectors and see if we can find anything that's gonna actually catch our attention. And here are the waveforms for the injectors. Okay. Actually, what I could do is I'm gonna turn off these channels here so you guys can see. My time base here is 20 milliseconds per screen, and then my voltage scale is 200 volts because these injectors actually spike a tremendous amount of voltage. Okay, let me just turn off these other channels here so you can see. Okay, and then here is the voltage of this injector. Hopefully you guys can see this. The max, actually it's hitting 100 and 111 volts in the max. Okay, and when I give it gas, I mean this line here kind of, this is actually the pulse width, the amount of time the computer turns on the injector. Okay, look at the voltage. I mean, I can't really tell if this injector is opening properly because this hump here, I don't know. I mean, I see some type of movement here. I don't know if that's the pinto hump. I can't really tell with this type of scope. And the voltage 116 volt. So let's turn this off, and because the lab scope didn't really give me much information, so I just took a somehow risk of replacing the injectors because that was the only thing I could think of. I was like, I don't see what's gonna cause this. I mean, fuel pressure is good, O2 sensors are good, mass airflow sensor is good, it had been replaced. I don't think the misfire is gonna cause that. So what I did was I actually called the junkyard and see if they had this type of engine. So I called the junkyard and they said they had it. I asked if I could buy the injectors, they said yes. So I went ahead and purchased the injectors. Okay, I wish I had my picoscope here so I could show you guys what I could show you guys the pinto hump on the injector waveforms properly, because I believe one of these injectors is not opening. So now what I did is I went ahead and replaced the injectors, but I haven't replaced them yet. I'm gonna show you. Let's zoom out here first. I'm gonna show you where the injectors are. And so the injectors actually leave back here. That's the injector rail. So the injectors, this is the injector rail right here, and as you can see, my test leads right here are connected to the injector's electrical connector. Okay, so I'm gonna have to remove this injector rail. It's gonna come with the injectors. Let's swap those out, and here is the rail that I got from the junkyard. So I got the whole rail. It actually came with a used regulator too. So let's swap those injectors and see what happens. So now let's replace this fuel injector fuel rail. So I already got the old fuel rail out. Okay, these are the injectors. This is the old one. Okay, so I got the whole fuel rail and the injectors from the junkyard. So let me tighten these. And like I said, these are very straightforward to do. I mean, they're not very complex. It only has 2 bolts here. I mean, it's just bolted down this way. And once you take these 2 bolts off and pull it out, the whole fuel rail and injectors come out. And there's a regulator here. Because I had swapped the regulators first to just for the heck of it, just to check and see if the issue was the regulator, but that didn't fix it. Here is actually the old regulator. So this is how it looks like, if some of you were curious to know. Okay, now the injectors have been installed. Let's look at some data pins first, and then hopefully this will fix the issue. So we're just gonna select the fuel trim data pins, these 2, and then this one and this one. So list. So hopefully you guys can see. Now we have high negative numbers on the short term. I mean, short term fuel trim bank 1. We see we have -20, -21, and then short term fuel trim on the bank 2, we have high negative numbers. And then when you look at the long term, so these numbers here would actually balance each other out. So right now, so total fuel trim right now at this point on bank 2, so 31 minus 21 is 10%, so which is good. And then same thing, I mean, we're gonna do the same thing on the on bank 2. Well, bank 2 is, I mean, way high. It's probably because it just went over the limit. At this point, I am satisfied with these numbers I'm getting. I need to test drive the car. I don't want to erase the check engine light first. I'm gonna test drive it and see what happens. But I'm definitely satisfied with the numbers I'm seeing. I mean, you guys can tell the difference, right? These numbers here look way better. So this is a fix, guys. Based on these numbers, I can call it a day. I mean, this is a fix. Okay, so I mean, I guess just for the heck of it, we can look at the injector waveforms too. So let's go to the scope side, and we can look at the injector waveforms. Oh, actually, look at this. So those injectors, I don't know if you guys can see. Can you see the pinto hump here? Look at the hump. Oh, this is actually way better. Can you guys see the hump? Yeah, this is what I was talking about. This is what I wanted to see. So this car had been running lean because those injectors were sticking. They were sticking because, I mean, look at this. Can you see the hump here? This is a nice looking hump here. But on the other ones, on the other injectors, we didn't have this hump. It was just kind of a flat line. I mean, there was some type of movement because this little bump you see here, this is the pinto hump inside the injector, you know, opening and closing. So let's look at the other ones. So this is the yellow trace. This is the first cylinder. Let's look at the other one. Oh man, this is good. This is a sweet looking hump right here. So this injector opens and closes properly. And now let me turn this channel off. I'm just gonna turn this channel off, and let's turn on the other one. As you guys can see, there's another hump here. Okay, here's the hump, and it looks just fine. Can you guys see that hump? And if I were to zoom in, on that, you'll probably see it. You'll probably see it very well. You know, kind of right here. Let me see if I can move this guy. I mean, bear with me here as I'm trying to figure out how this Zeus here, how this Zeus lab scope works. I mean, I haven't used it in a while. I mean, you guys can tell right here, you know, here is the hump. Okay, and this actually is this is how a good working injector should look like. And as you guys can see, our numbers here have significantly decreased. Oh, this is awesome. I mean, the bank 2 is already doing great. Okay, and you see bank 1, so we got minus 16.3 on the short terms, and then we got positive 22.7 on the long term. So this one was actually, they will balance each other out. So if you want to do the total trim of bank 1, would be 22 minus 16. Okay, so this is a fix, guys. I'm not worried about the misfire. I'm not worried about the misfire code, because I mean, when she brought it here, she said she was concerned about those two codes. I don't know why on my scanner it's not showing the P0172. It's only showing the P0171. But, and also these injectors not opening properly would also cause a misfire, because if it's not spraying the correct amount of fuel in the cylinder, that will cause it too. So, okay guys, I'm gonna end this video here. It's been a long day. I'm gonna call this a fix, and I can say this with 100% surety that this is fixed, based on the data I'm getting and based on the waveforms that we saw on the lab scope. And this is a fix, guys. I hope you guys like this video. If you like it, give me a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, K Diagnostics, because there will be more awesome videos coming up. As you guys can tell, I'm kind of mumbling here. It's been a long day, and it's getting late here. I gotta go home. But you know, thanks for watching. If you have any comment questions, leave them in the comment box. And if you think there's something I missed, or something that I would have checked, or maybe there's another better way of doing this, please let me know, because I would like to know. Let me know in the comment section. And guys, remember, always do your diagnosis properly and take your time to test things instead of just throwing parts at them. I mean, I could tell with those other injectors that I couldn't really see the pin to hump, but I didn't know if that was right or no. I mean, I was suspicious of the first waveform that I showed you guys, and that was also the only thing I can think of that could cause this. And you guys could tell the difference when we put these other injectors from the junkyard, which are actually non-good, and the waveform looked a lot better. We could really see the pin to hump. So guys, it's not as hard as it looks. You can do it too. So thanks for watching. See you guys next time.